You're worth more than your degree. You are more than your degree. Welcome back to the channel. Very happy to have you here. This video is going to be about my best advice for new marketing graduates and some best practices I think you guys need to take in account and some knowledge that you guys need to take in account when you're looking for that first marketing role. Now, some of this advice is a bit broader, so if you're not in a marketing role or something similar like sales or whatever the case is, this advice is very transferable to those industries as well. It's not just marketing focused. So first and foremost, understand that a degree, your degree, is just a foundation. Now, there seems to be a bit of a misconception regarding you go through high school, secondary school, you get good grades, go to college or university, get a 2-1 or a first or an A or whatever it is, best in the class, and that automatically means that the employers are going to be at your feet begging for you to join their organisation. Now, that might have been the case 20 or 30 years ago, but nowadays it's really not the case, and a lot of new grads are sold a bit of a pipe dream to think that that is the case. Now, that isn't to say the best of the best students, the 0.1% who get accepted into grad schemes, are going to go forward and have quite an easy time out of university if they get instantly accepted into a grad scheme. But I think a lot of individuals, especially if you're watching this video, probably aren't or haven't been or didn't try to get into a grad scheme, because I went through the exact same process. Before marketing, I had my eyes set for some reason on investment banking. I really wanted to work in investment banking, just chasing the money probably. But what that meant is I applied for every grad scheme possible at every single bank. There were 6-7 round interview stages. Several hours of my time wasted doing video interviews and writing scripts and doing projects to PowerPoint presentations and all this nonsense. Ultimately, just to be beaten out by an individual who went to a better university or interviewed better or whatever. But me as a sole individual applying to something that has also had 2,000 or 3,000 other applications, because many grad schemes do have a couple thousand applications, I sort of view that whole process as a big waste of time. I feel like there's many more opportunities to work smarter, to get yourself into a smaller organisation and grow your skills from there, rather than trying your hardest to get into a grad scheme. It's something I'm going to touch upon a bit later. Is I have a suspicious feeling that you will grow a lot more as an employee and also as an individual if you actually start real work in a real company. Not to say they're not real companies, but an actual official job position, not a graduate, not a junior, an actual proper job position. But something we're going to talk about a bit later. If you are watching this and maybe you're a year away from graduating, this would be the best time to take on some side projects or try to find a junior position in a small company somewhere. Because guess what? If your CV is just made up of sort of retail part-timey jobs you had when you were a teenager and your nice fancy looking degree, you're going to apply for a job that has a couple hundred more applicants, and guess what? They're going to have the exact same qualifications as you. So if you have nothing else to stand out with, such as a side project that, was semi-successful, or maybe some charitable project, or simply a part-time job inside of that industry, then there isn't really anything to distinguish you from another individual that has applied with the same grades as you. Now, I'm going to invite you to step back for a second and sort of listen to my experience as a hiring manager. I recently hired for a junior creative marketing individual, and I had many applicants for that role that just had a degree and they didn't have a portfolio, and this was a creative role. So yes, you did art, or yes, you did graphic design at university, but you're not showing me the work you're doing. You're not presenting me with any tangible proof. Now, as myself in this role as an employer, if I see an individual that has work experience at a firm creatively, or is linking me to a portfolio where they're showing me tangible pieces of work that fits the bill for the job description I wrote, then of course I'm going to want to interview that person over an interview. Now, of course, I'm going to want to interview that person over interviewing someone who just has a degree. And again, to give you a bit more context, I work in quite a small organisation and time is very valuable. So I'm not looking to interview 20, 30 people. I'm looking to interview the best 2 or 3 out of what was 120 applications for the role. So first impressions ultimately are the most important thing. So I would highly recommend building some sort of tangible experience or a project that you could show off in a portfolio or in your resume itself, not only to make yourself stand out, but to also prove to the hiring manager that you can step in and do a role. Because ultimately they're a business that needs a position filled for a certain reason. And a lot of the times, smaller companies especially, but even bigger companies, they don't want to have to train for 3 to 6 months. They want someone who can come in, have a week of sort of settling down, getting used to everything, and bang, they can execute and crack on. With that in mind, the blueprint is to have some tangible experience, whether it's official work experience, just see what local companies are in your area. Let's take marketing for an example once again. There's a couple of local companies in your area. Volunteer to do some social media management work, or see if there's any paid opportunities in your area to do some email marketing, or to build some SEO, do some graphic design or website development. Like, take each marketing function, like website design for example, and start to offer that as a service when you're in university, because then slowly you'll build a portfolio of work which almost acts as your CV in general. Especially if the roles you're looking to apply to are creative based, then having a couple words on a CV talking about your creative work isn't no way near as powerful as actually showing that work. Now, a lot of people think that portfolio is just for visual and creative work. That is absolutely not the case. Let's say you're applying for an investment banking role. There's no sort of tangible execution that you could work on. It's not like tech where you could show off an app you developed, or it's not like creative where you can show off some graphic design. Like, what do you do for investment banking? You could write about it, show off some expertise about a certain field or what you're interested in, because you're not going to go into investment banking without having some knowledge or having opinions about certain news or whatever the case is. There's always a piece of execution that can come out of anything. So using that in the early days to build a portfolio and build a bank of work that you can show off to employers is going to level you up quite a bit compared to the individual who's applying with just the resume with their degree on it. Something I realised very early on as well was that you don't have to be in big tech, you don't have to be in fintech or investment banking, or you don't have to be in these big named sort of trendy niches. There is a boatload of opportunity available with smaller companies, less fancy, some less sexy organisations. For example, I work for a B2B trade body organisation. It sounds horrifically boring when I explain it to people, but it was my first sort of official marketing role, and a year and a half later I'm now marketing manager of the organisation. And in a year's time, or in a couple of years' time, depending on what happens, I'm going to go to a bigger company and sit down with the hiring manager and talk to them about how I helped grow this business over the last few years. And working at a smaller company is something I think is really unique and special, because usually your execution and the work you do on a day-to-day basis has a long-lasting effect on the company. And at a smaller organisation, you're not necessarily a number in the system anymore. Your actions have real tangible importance to the growth of that company, which ultimately builds a story that you can tell to future hiring managers at bigger companies. So I would implore you to take a look at some small companies or companies in industries you never would have thought of applying to before, because if you're going through multiple different grad schemes or different internships or whatever, and you can't land something, maybe it's time to cast the net a bit wider. And the thing is, the senior leadership in these companies understand that they don't work in a sexy industry, so whenever they do get an application from someone with certain expertise, they're going to be a lot more willing to jump on an interview and really listen to you explain your expertise and how they could be an asset to the business. And ultimately, with smaller businesses, you're going to be talking to the decision maker head on straight away. Where at larger corporations, there's a lot of politics, a lot of messages being moved up to person to person to person, and usually you'll never talk to the person who made the final decision about your hire anyway. And it's the whole thing about being a number in the system, which isn't very attractive to me anyway. And I would just implore you guys to take a look at smaller organisations and see how you can fit in and make a big impact on that organisation. Because ultimately, you go on LinkedIn, you go on any grad scheme, hundreds of applications. You go on look at internships or junior roles, hundreds of applications. Start to take out this idea of grad scheme and internship and apprenticeship and look at just sort of lower level positions in the first place. Something like marketing assistant, something like social media executive, something like sales representative. These are jobs that are still classed as entry level jobs, but they don't get applied to by graduates nearly as much as what grad schemes and other internships do, simply because they're less attractive. But usually you're going to get paid more at a proper full-time job position than an internship, for example, and you're most probably going to be treated better. So that is a couple bits of advice from a marketing manager who recently did his first hire and took some of these points into consideration. Thought I would share them with you guys just to give you a better shot at landing the job role after you graduate, because it is very tough for Gen Z at the minute, especially regarding jobs. And we get classes lazy, we get classes unmotivated, or whatever the case is. I think that's all horrifically wrong. I think Gen Z are going to be the forefront of, you know, most of the innovation that happens in the next sort of 20, 30 years or so. But just leverage your ability more than just your degree is the advice, the ultimate advice I would give, because you're worth more than your degree, you are more than your degree, and a lot of employers see degrees on almost every single application. So something tangible always has to be attributed alongside the degree. Hope you land something soon, but catch you in a bit. Later.